Welcome everyone to the October 29th hybrid planning board meeting. To open the meeting tonight, we will do a roll call vote since we are not all in the same room.
How's that?
Perfect.
Okay.
That way we can at least see what you all are seeing too. So with that, I will go down the line here and have everyone vote themselves present, I guess, for lack of a better term. So Sue?
Present. Here, Linda Miller.
Mark Peter Marquez here, and Rob Almeida.
Here.
And I, Andrew Boardman, am also here. So that constitutes a quorum of our board. And I think that's everyone who's attending. So with that, we will begin with the first agenda item, which is a joint meeting with the West Concord Advisory Committee.
I think, Susan, I don't think you have a quorum, so.
I might now.
Is 4 a quorum for you?
And five. We got one
Five,
percent
oh,
line.
and,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
so,
Me.
yes, you,
Yay.
Yay.
You're a star.
right.
Yeah.
so if you could open up your joint meeting and take your roll call vote. and then
Sure, yes,
That's all we
okay.
need for you to do.
So I'll do the room first and then online. Barbara. Present. Yeah. Linda. Present. Nicole.
Present.
And Anna.
Present.
Great. Oh, and we've got John as well, who just joined. John, are you present?
Yep.
Awesome. Great. And I'm Susan, I'm present as well. And Greg is here too. Greg, are you present? Looks like he is.
I am.
Great. Cool.
Okay, oh, you do want me to start this?
All right,
Oh,
I mean-
sure.
Yeah.
So the West Concord Advisory Committee and the Planning Board usually hold a joint meeting in the fall. And I think you had also talked about holding one in the spring,
Mhm.
just to go over what each of you are doing, since the West Concord Advisory Committee is basically a subcommittee of the Planning Board, and discuss, different topics and priorities and moving forward, and how the West Concord Advisory Committee can, assist the planning board and, vice versa. So I don't know if Susan, you want to give an update of what WCAG's up to
Yeah,
and then.
sure. So yeah, I would say most recently, the last few meetings, we have been going through a spreadsheet that the West Concord Master Plan, which was, I believe, published in 2010, created to delineate the different hoped for projects that would be done in West Concord in the years following the publication of the master plan. And so there's like a multi-page master plan written document, but then it kind of produced this laundry list of advised improvements. And so we've been going through and looking at those and trying to assess, have they been completed? Have they been partially done? Have they been not done at all? To kind of take an inventory of where we are now. I guess it's 14 years later. So we have completed looking at every one of our rows, and the next time we meet, we're gonna get together to kind of code these in a uniform way so that someone could say, sort the spreadsheet to say, show me all the ones that have been completed, show me the ones that are 50%, show me the ones that are 0, that type of thing. So that we can have a place to start, I would say, as we think about what the West Concord Village should be looking to do in upcoming years, and how we can hopefully work with you all on the planning board to make some of those items happen, how we might be able to work with the MCI committee to roll a few of these things in under their purview. So we're basically getting the information together, and then I think we will shop it around and see what we can get done. Does that sound reasonable?
Very, at least to me. I mean, anytime I find it in town, if you actually have something written down and part of a plan, it tends to carry more weight than if someone just goes up and presents, if it's part of a vetted master plan for the area, it works better.
Yeah, right.
So I guess, so is there time frame for that? I don't know, like compared to the other, because you mentioned MCI, they're operating on a specific time frame. Do you see your project being completed in advance of that, or to help assist that, or is this like, I just don't know?
Yeah, I would say we would like to be completed to assist with that. I've learned that they're in the initial planning process of spending like 725K, I think, that needs to be spent by the end of June 2025. And I would love to meet with them to share what we have accomplished in getting this inventory of items that are done and not done in West Concord, and get their thoughts on how we might be able to, again, like loop any of these undone items that are high priority into some of the work they're doing for MCI.
I was only going to say, MCI, we don't know yet what will happen with MCI.
Right.
It could be 100% housing, it could be 100% commercial, it could be a mix. If it incorporates housing and yet you're looking at it, I wonder if you have taken any thoughts about Novo Riverside, which, while housing will act to integrate the Baker Ave Business District more and the new development more tightly with West Concord Business Districts. And I'm not saying you should do that, I'm just saying that if you're thinking about MCI Concord, it seems like this is almost similar.
Yeah, and more near term, maybe as your point too. Like,
Yeah,
know what's gonna
and
happen
physically
afterwards.
near perhaps, but well, the river's in the way, but yeah. Also, the planning board, we haven't really taken action on it yet. We're planning on looking into business district zoning with respect to combined business residence and dimensions. So one of the interesting things to me, at least, about West Concord is that it has the West Concord Business District and especially the West Concord Village District, where in the Village District, you can't have parking in front of buildings. In fact, there's a maximum setback in addition to a minimum setback. And I wonder if you would be interested in discussing with us or amongst yourselves whether you think it would be worthwhile extending that to any other parts of West Concord or all of Concord, but that would not be in your purview. If so, why? And if not, why not? Because that could help the planning board think about how to do this for all of Concord. Do you guys have an interest in perspective that I think could be useful to inform our discussions about whether we do anything with that?
Yeah, we would love to be part of any discussions that you all are, like, you're thinking about changing zoning for all of Concord, like, obviously that affects West Concord too, and if we have a lot of opinions and like to have spirited discussions amongst ourselves, so I think we could probably come up with guidance, that would be well thought out and data driven possibly even, and then share that with you.
That would be great. I mean, I speak unfairly as a former member of the West Concord Task Force, and very briefly, the West Concord Advisory Committee. I think the West Concord Village District zoning is awesome for a central business district, and we should have more of that in all of Concord. Why should West Concord be the only ones to benefit? But it is a complicated, reasonably complicated idea that has implications, and just because I think something doesn't make it true for everybody and all over. So anyway, there we are. And also, especially with the West Concord shopping plaza not getting any younger. And if we're gonna make changes, it should be before somebody up and decides to tear it down and build something new there. And I don't expect that to happen instantly, but you never know. You just never know.
Not just one fire, knock on wood, but you know what I mean? It
Yeah,
happened in Natick where one building burned and then all of a sudden it was the moment to like figure out what they could do with it and up its potential had passed because. that
well, I
person-
look at, what is it, Dino's Pizza? It
Oh, yeah,
did
that-
burn down and they were
Oh,
forced to
yeah.
rebuild it
Differently.
without, according to, well, no, they could use, involuntary demolition, but they could not use reasonable zoning because the zoning was unreasonable, and so, yeah, at least according to me. So, yes, yeah, good point. One fire or,
Yeah.
one change in development patterns of somebody deciding something, yeah. So,
So this is
There.
zoning for mixed residential and business
Well,
use, is
well,
that what
these
you were
are, well,
describing?
these are two separate things. One is there's a question of hardly anybody is using the combined business residence use, where you can have a building that contains both retail and apartments,
Mhm.
or both industrial and business and apartments, like you see at 50 Baharrel, or like you see at Concord Outfitted. Wait, did they put housing in?
Concord Outfitters.
Yeah.
They did put housing in?
They have,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah, they did. So
that's
that
the
can
exception.
go in a business district, but lots of other things can go in a business district, like, you know, a business, just plain a business. And right now, in most of Concord, in a business district, it says you have to make your building way far away from the street, put the parking lot in front, and have the pedestrians walk through a parking lot to get there. That does not build a nice walkable streetscape, but the village, Concord, West Concord Village District is different. You are not allowed to do that. And I will point out that all of our old buildings that everybody likes are all like the village district, West Concord Village District. But they predate zoning, and that's why they're like that. So we could extend that to other parts of Concord. We could make it be just like the West Concord Village District, or we could make it be sort of like the West Concord Village District. And separately, we could do something about combined business residence, which nobody uses because the affordable housing requirement is so onerous that nobody can afford to build anything. But
It's not that people haven't tried.
yeah, and it has happened, but virtually not at all. So, so those are they're two completely separate zoning changes that would be pursued completely separately, but they intersect because they have to do with business districts, and that's the only way in which they're related at all. We could do one, the other, both, or neither.
What does your group have on the agenda for the next 12 to 18 months that would require our working with you on? Do you have any specific projects that are gonna require some zoning approval or some changes?
We don't, but we are heavily interested in parking, not only like the residential parking bylaws that you all are looking at, but also achieving some sort of shared parking solution in West Concord, because it's been our observation that as new construction comes to us to be approved, there's a lot of parking being established that we feel like, gosh, there's lots of empty spaces all around. Why is it that we have to pave over more land in order to create the parking for these suggested buildings? And so we would love to take a holistic look at that. I know Elizabeth has said it might be hard because it entails negotiating maybe with some of the business owners in West Concord who happen to own those parking spaces, but I think that's something that has continued to come up, is the abundance of parking, but yet this kind of mindset that there's not any parking available, or like we've got to create more and more.
Just checking, you do know that there's a joint parking arrangement. Is it joint, I think is the right word, not shared, between the businesses, including Deborah's and everybody else in that little row? Yeah, which is a great model, but was hard to create.
But it's still private.
It's falling.
It is still private, yes. Public would be even better, but at least it is not chopping things up so that you have to move your car
Right.
next door.
A lot of, as you probably know, so many of the lots have Woods Hill only, Deborah lot only. And we also have no signage for what is available parking wise.
No signage for the public parking, still after 15 years
Exactly.
plus, yep.
Exactly. So I think if we want to make it more of a thriving business community, which we've all discussed loads for a while now, it does need to be more signage, which is what Ann Sussman and many, many others have been saying as well.
Using Lexington as an example, who went there? I forget which.
It was Anna.
Yeah,
Anna, thank you for all those pictures of Lexington.
yeah.
And explain that to me.
They have done, would you want to?
No.
Or Anna.
Anna might know it more than
Oh,
anybody.
sure. So Lexington has a very nice system. It's not complicated, but when you drive into town, there's signs that say public parking this way, and they all look the same. So, you know, your eye can just pick up the trail and it takes you to parking behind all the buildings. just really simple, but it works well.
But it's also because they have a consistent design, graphic design treatment that they also list, you know, places of public interest. So it's a very cohesive look and feel. I mean, I'm in marketing, so I look at this stuff and it's very welcoming and well organized, and it really leaves a very positive impression. We don't have anything like that in West Concord, at least.
But they have a fair amount of parking behind those buildings that is available, and I'm not so sure that we have that in a public space.
Not in
Okay.
West Concord,
Right.
yeah.
No, we don't.
Okay.
Well, we kind of do. There's public parking at the train station.
The train station, yeah.
But if
But I'm
you
not
there's
so
also-
sure-
Oh, and at the dry cleaners, which is completely unsigned.
Yeah,
Right, that's the
Yeah.
thing, you don't really know as a visitor coming
Right.
in
that's true.
how to
Right.
access. See, we do, because we've looked
Yeah.
there and we figured it out, but it's not very welcoming.
I should think that would be a fairly easy fix.
And yet, it's been under discussions for as long as I can remember,
Yeah.
and we still don't have it.
Yeah.
So it can't be that easy.
And is that because we don't have a champion of it, or?
I can tell you several people who championed it very strongly, and I don't know what happened.
Okay.
I think there are different groups. It sounds like last time we talked about this, different groups are working on this.
Yeah.
Right, I can't remember which other committee.
Maybe
was-
transportation advisory to a certain extent, then there's West Concord Junction Cultural District Committee, maybe economic development or economic vitality.
Vitality.
Yeah,
So maybe it doesn't have an owner.
Okay, well, that's certainly something that, you know, maybe you guys can work on. I'm not so sure that falls in our purview, but we'd be happy to help.
okay,
And yeah, I think it's a great idea, okay? You know, when you look at, and I don't want to get to the second topic, but when you look at parking even in downtown Concord, you know, the studies that were done a decade or more ago, it hasn't changed that much. You know, we had over 3,000 parking spots available within what we call the Concord Business District, okay? And yet they aren't well used, okay? I mean, you know, when you look at peak demand is like 2,200 at any one point in time. So you'd think that we've got plenty of parking, and yet it doesn't appear to be that way when people come into town. Okay,
Mhm.
so I think it's the same problem.
Yeah.
It's about allocating the space to the best use.
Right.
Okay,
And if you're going to take this on, my personal bugbear is that at the train station, all the parking is signed, you have to pay for this at all times. But why not? Why can't it just be general public parking outside of commuting hours after somebody figures out what that would mean? And why can't the signage that doesn't exist to tell you it's public parking, tell you anybody can park here after 4 PM, 6 PM, whatever?
but unfortunately, parking in our purview relates to zoning, okay? And
Oh, we couldn't do that. This
so
is not
you
our
know,
job.
Really isn't what we do. okay?
Yeah, this is why I mentioned it to you, because
Okay.
it's not the planning board's job to
Right.
do that. Yeah.
Okay,
but even so, if it's not under your purview, we're kind of a subsidiary of your committee, we're okay to work on it.
You can
Well,
advocate.
it's using, it's leveraging your expertise to advocate for the position that is, you know, best for West Concord. And if best for West Concord is mixed use developments do not need 1.5, you know, spots per unit. We looked at it and, you know, all these things work really well. This district really only needs 3/4 of a spot. That's advocating, and we can take that and under advisement and move with it if we think it's appropriate, but it's none of us make a change on our own, so.
That's, that
Yeah.
1.5 years or one or whatever, that's our world.
Yeah,
The rest of it is.
Yeah.
That's all.
you know, how the commuter lot is divided between its 3 different owners, or however many people have an interest in that, that's kind of. That's more of like a wish list thing
Mhm.
that can be brought somewhere else, I guess, but it's not under our purview, yeah.
Well, and you know, there's parking by Concord Park now where everybody goes and bicycle. I know that when I go to Concord Park every fourth Sunday, and there's tons of people that park there.
Yeah.
You know. They park there.
Right.
But anyway,
But when it comes to like designing signage, you could be involved in that, even though it's not the
Yeah.
planning board's job. Now, the people who would end up putting up the signage would be Public Works, and I think you would have to at least check with Elizabeth before you went to Public Works about, hey.
No,
No.
no.
No, you could just go straight to Public Works?
You would have a conversation with the select
On
board,
the select board,
and the
okay,
town manager.
okay,
And about a coordinated signage program.
okay.
I imagine, we have our select board liaison, Wendy Ruoli here. So I do know that, parking, even for the select board is, a topic of conversation that they're having about public parking. And so it may be that the select board does ask, a member from West Concord Advisory Committee, the Economic Vitality Committee. We have, the chair of the EVC here and the Economic Vitality Manager here as well. Plus, Mimi also supports the West Concord Junction Cultural District, who, as a history before Mimi was here, they did get a, Mass Cultural Grant. Yeah, I think so. Hired a consultant to assist with trying to develop coordinated wayfinding, signage for, West Concord, and there was just never a consensus on the design, and, it was a project that, Marcia was trying to shepherd, and no consensus, and then, that's as far as it went, so.
We tried the same thing here in downtown Concord in the historic district and spent a whole bunch of money on consultants and had layouts of signs, but I don't think anything really
Right.
came of it.
So I think when it comes to a coordinated signage, on public property, in public, on public lands, in the roads, and, that is something that will have to be, spearheaded by the select board, with input from these groups.
I think the rec commission's doing exactly the same thing with their
Sorry.
facility signage,
Yeah.
that part of their strategic plan is to do the same thing.
Hmm.
Which hopefully.
But that sounds like a project that would have some benefit, okay? So,
Oh,
You know.
it would definitely have a benefit, but it's a large, complicated.
Right.
Project. It involves, private property owners and not just town land, but you talk about the MBTA, the commuter rail stations, you talk then, West Concord, commuter rail station, it's not, there's town land, there's MBTA land, and then there's land owned by MassDOT right-of-way division, so there's 3 different entities controlling 3 different parts of that parking.
I was
So-
only talking about signing the Concord-owned part, but then you have to indicate which is a Concord-owned
Well,
part, so.
I think from a
Signage
public
is-
parking, standpoint, you have the commuter parking at Crosby's. Before COVID, the planning division was, the entity involved with taking in applications. A certain number of those 52 spaces are for town residents, and then a certain number is for non-residents. Town residents get a permit for 6 months, non-residents 3 months. And a renewal at offset time periods. And so finally, finance took that one over, and then COVID happened, and I think everybody has been there. Maybe that needs to be reevaluated, cause on any given day, there's less than 12 cars, parked there, so. But the same thing is with the town-owned land at West Concord.
Right.
There used to be a waiting list for people to get those. Again, 12 cars parking there, every day. So I think it's a much larger conversation. But I think that whole transportation conversation goes so far beyond, anybody in this room. I've heard from, bicycle advocates, And I think this was talked about at the West Concord Advisory Committee the last time, that little section of Comm Ave, right on, Woods Hill Table. It's like, there's parking on both sides and you can barely get 2 passing cars. And yes, I understand taking away parking, but if you were to open up public parking, in the commuter lot, take parking away from one side section of that street, have a dedicated bike lane. And offset things, but that, that's a big conversation to have. And you would, you really would have to educate people, and I think this is where all of these committee members come in, educating people, taking away those 12 spots. Is not gonna be devastating if you've, had a holistic approach in a conversation and, did, something somewhere else. So,
Right.
And have the right signs. Yeah.
and have the right signs to go with it, so, yeah, I think it's. I think it's a really, much bigger conversation that,
So
So
yeah,
is
that's,
there a small piece of it that we could tackle?
Well, I think the small piece to tackle is what you discussed is your upcoming meeting plans. That's like the initial, at least I see as the initial, like, first step is see where you really are and where you really want to go in the next year. And then I think the parking advocacy thing is obviously going to be an ongoing discussion.
but so some parking changes might be coming related to the residential equation, I guess.
Right, because that's also the part we control,
Yeah.
or have more. We don't,
Yeah.
obviously, we don't control it. It just comes under our purview.
And how can we be active in like supporting that in your work on that? Because I feel like it kind of bolts into what we're talking about.
First of all, we have to decide as a planning board, what we're gonna move forward with,
Mhm.
okay? We had hoped to do it last year, but there was so much else going on, we put it off, okay? And we've got a whole bunch of information gathered together now about parking to put something forward for the 2025 warrant and town meeting, okay? But we haven't decided as a planning board yet exactly what we're going to do, okay? That's part of what we're gonna thrash out tonight, hopefully, okay? So I
Okay,
think when we do that, then we can tell you this is what our thoughts are,
yeah,
and this is how you can help.
okay, yeah.
Right? Does that make sense?
Or give us some feedback
Right,
as
yeah.
to
Right.
ideas that would fall in our purview in terms of parking.
Yeah,
Well,
because
I've done that, I met with the West
Right,
Concord
right.
Advisory and the EDA and all that, we started to do that, okay, so I think we have an idea of what people are looking for.
Okay,
So,
okay.
okay. Okay,
I don't have anything else to talk about. I don't.
Everybody's looking at me.
Well, like one other thing that I know we really want to make sure of is that as these MCI discussions unfold, that everyone remembers that like West Concord Village is not very far from that property, and we want to make sure that somehow that area doesn't get developed. I know this is years down the road, but developed into its own little kind of like self-sufficient bubble that isolates West Concord Village, because the village has so much to offer, and we want to make certain that it connects like very organically with what's happening at MCI. So maybe if you guys could just have that in the back of your mind as you kind of like listen to all the discussions happening with MCI. I know we're keeping close track. We want to interact with that committee to kind of like remind them that we should be integrating West Concord Village as opposed to isolating it.
I've actually been thinking about that. When you think about downtown Concord, it's got two centers, like a little
Mhm.
binary star system, and West Concord is just one, but it could be the same, that there's these two very closely allied business districts and village centers that are not quite one and not quite two. But we have that interesting model already in
Yeah.
town, so yes, I completely agree, it shouldn't be, neither of them should be isolated in a bubble. But I think we have a positive model for how that could not be.
Interesting. They're actually probably a comparable distance apart too.
To who?
They're probably a comparable distance apart, like sort of like that half mile,
Oh,
third of a
mhm.
mile kind of.
Yeah, especially
yeah.
when you consider by the rail trail, but
Yeah.
really either way you go, they're that close,
They're pretty
yeah.
close, yeah. Anyway. Well. Guess, thank you all for coming. Yeah, so we will obviously keep each other in the loop.
Yeah.
As a next steps.
Where can we find out more about, you were talking about the combined business and residence, I guess, decision-making that's happening?
Okay, so we're really just getting started on that. So,
Okay.
in some ways, this is an outgrowth of several years ago, there was the idea of rezoning the, Thoreau and Sudbury business district areas, and, that failed at town meeting, but there were some interesting ideas there that could, on the one hand, maybe be applied to the whole town's business districts, and on the other hand, probably with some changes, given that it failed at town meeting. But we have a small amount of money from a consultant related to MBTA communities to look at, could we apply MBTA communities zoning to business districts, as we mostly chose not to do before, in some reasonable way, but it kind of didn't get ready for this year's town meeting, so I would say keep tabs, because we're just getting started on that. Yeah, and that's something we'll be looking at over the next year, I hope.
Okay,
Yeah, and I volunteered to take point on that in the planning board, so ask me,
okay.
yeah, or attend planning board
But it
meetings.
would probably
with
be
your
for
co-leads.
town meeting 2026, not.
Right.
2025.
Okay.
Right, yeah,
Right.
which means we'd be doing the work over the next year, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, it won't be on, I don't think it'll be on, anything like that will be on next spring's warrant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great,
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna stay and listen to the discussion because we're gonna be talking about residential parking. Is it okay if we stay?
oh yeah, you're welcome to.
Okay.
Public meeting.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, the members of our committee are welcome to drop off if you want. I'm gonna listen to the parking discussion
Great.
a little bit, and if others want to as well, then yeah.
So, with that, we'll move on to the second agenda item of the night, our potential parking, zoning bylaw parking requirement discussion. So Mark had done some. Well, I'll let you take it away.
So, yeah, and really what my goal tonight is, we talked a lot about this, and the whole concept was to go for low hanging fruit to see what we could accomplish. That I still feel very strongly that we need to address the residential component to it, okay? The way it's written now, it's a 1940s zoning article, and we need to update that, okay? We need to figure out how best to do that. The ADU law states that anything within a half a mile of a train station doesn't require a parking spot, okay? Do we apply some of that theory to what we're trying to accomplish tonight, okay, or what we're gonna put forward? So I'm trying to figure that, there's a lot of different ways we can do it. I think that you saw the consultant's work. Those of you that haven't, the consultant came back to us with some changes, that if you have a residence, it requires 2 parking spots. If you're building a house out on Monument Street, then, it's appropriate that it have 2 parking spots outside of a garage. If it has a garage, that doesn't count, okay? So, and then for the way they articulate it is that for multifamily, okay, or apartments, or for moderate income, it requires 1.5 spots, okay? And the thing that they put in was a senior housing component to it that required 1 spot, okay? So the question is that what we do, okay? Or do we look at it based upon the number of bedrooms in a multifamily? The real question isn't primary residence. Primary residence, we stay at 2, okay? I think everybody's comfortable with that should stay the way it is. So then you look at the other component too. You look at multifamily or, duplexes or, residences close to a train station, and do we treat those differently? And if we treat them differently, do we do it by the size of the residence? 1 bedroom, 1 parking spot, 2 bedrooms, 1.5, or some configuration of that, okay? And I don't have the answer to that. All the information that we've gathered is based upon industry standards, because that's really what our consultant does, is they go in and look at what, if you've seen the correspondence, there's a agency that monitors all this stuff, and that's really what they do, is they draw out information from them, okay? So we're gonna try to update our parking zoning based upon current industry standards, that's really our goal, okay? But we have to make it fit into Concord and what we're trying to accomplish in Concord. As everybody knows, a lot of cities across the country and in the Boston area have done away with parking zoning completely, okay? Anybody that I've talked to, I've said that we can't do that. We are still an automobile dependent community, so we have to have some parking requirements. We want to have the least parking requirements that we can that don't clog up our neighborhoods and stuff, for a couple of reasons. One is an average cost of a parking spot in like an apartment building is $5,000. Okay, so if you can reduce the number of parking spots, you can reduce the costs a developer has to put in to build an apartment building. That's a good thing, okay? Obviously, we would also like to limit vehicular traffic here in Concord, if we can, okay? Can we do that through parking zoning? Maybe, I don't know, but we certainly have to have that in mind, okay? So I throw a whole bunch of things up in the air, it's sort of, that's where we are, okay? And then, so there's the residence component to it, which I just talked about, but then there's also the business component to it, okay? And that's just as important, and I've met with the select board about it, and I've met with the EBC about it. And, they have some ideas on how to do it, okay? I'm not so sure I have a great solution to how we can encourage businesses in the town based upon parking zoning, okay? I think the signage and making what parking is available known to everybody is a great thing. The other component that I've talked about in this is shared parking or joint parking, okay? I think there are ways that we can do that. It's not easy, and it's really not something that we can necessarily control, okay? I use the example of Holy Family Parish, State Bromwich Church, okay? They have that parking lot up behind it, okay? We get paid by 40 Monument, whatever the office building there next to it. They pay us every year to let their office people park in our parking lot, okay? And to the church, it's a fair amount of money, okay, and it's found money, okay? I think we could do more of that, okay? When the Art Institute wanted to expand their building, they didn't have enough parking for the square footage they were gonna be allowed. So we wrote a letter, the church did, saying that, you can use our parking lot, and it allowed them to be able to move forward with that without being restricted by parking. Again, that's not necessarily something we can control. We can make suggestions, okay? For it to work, it doesn't have to be deeded, but there has to be some sort of a contract that we can see that says you're gonna allow these people to park there. You can't just be, that you can let me park in this parking lot. So, anyways, so I've thrown a lot of stuff up on it, okay? The planning board, I think, has seen the correspondence from the consultant. Okay, the question is, how do we want to move forward with that? Okay, do we want to move forward with the 4 or 5 suggestions that he's made? Okay, and they relate just to residents at this point. We'll get to the business component of it in just a second. Okay, but so it's my opinion that we ought to pick the easiest things that we can accomplish that aren't going to confuse folks at town meeting. Okay. And I think if you get too far into the weeds on this, we'll have a hard time getting anything passed. Okay. I think we should address the residents part of it. And I think we should probably take the suggestion of the consultant into that 3 components. The second part of it, I think we need to chat about how we want to do that. Do we want to do it based upon, his suggestion of 1.5? Or do we want to do it based upon apartment size? And then how does this relate to the MBTA project and what their requirement is? Because I think we need to, keep that in the back of our mind as well. So I need people's input.
Well, one thing I noticed is that if we say 1 space for senior versus 1.5 for other multifamily, that is going to incentivize more senior housing. And on the one hand, we desperately need more senior housing, but on the other hand, we desperately need all housing and anything that's like deed restricted to seniors or otherwise controlled for only seniors is, the more you restrict something, the harder it is to meet the needs of the moment when things change. And simply having apartments at all, smaller dwellings at all of any kind is a desperate need.
But of course,
But
we
I
can't-
also see the point that, you know, okay, 55-year-old seniors probably aren't driving much less, but if it's a senior development, the average age will be higher and people will be driving somewhat less. So I'm a little torn on that point. I must say my general feeling is to say, well, to keep it simple, why don't we say 1 bedroom, 1 space? 2 bedrooms, 1.5 spaces, more bedrooms, 2 spaces, no matter what it is. And if it's if it's a 1 bedroom, single family house, which I doubt exists, then it would only require 1 space.
I mean, between 1 and 2, no matter what the unit size, basically. And so it's 1 to 1.5 to 2, and then beyond 2, like you could have a
Oh.
4 bedroom units, but you only need 2 parking spaces, like at that point.
Well, that's what we require now. I wouldn't say more. And,
Right.
and you know, anything that's got 8 bedrooms is probably some giant
Something
mansion
else.
where people have lots of land anyway, and they can choose their own parking or no parking. Use their land the way they can
Mhm.
afford to.
Yeah.
That's my personal feeling, but I could also be convinced otherwise with interesting
But of
arguments.
course, MBTA excludes doing it by age, so, you know, any project that's MBTA can't be.
Well, and that would be
age-related.
another reason to make it not age related, is it simplifies matters, and then it wouldn't be about, if we did it solely by number of bedrooms, then it just wouldn't matter at all whether, how close to the train station it was, except for the exception that ADUs within a half mile of the train station now by state law can't require any parking,
That's
but,
all right.
okay, but,
That's-
you know, that's a state carved
That's an
exception, don't worry about it.
exception, yeah.
Uh,
What we're trying to do is simplify the process, so we
Right.
don't have to do a special condition because they're putting in an apartment complex and, based upon the square footage of it, they need 52 parking spots, when we don't think they need them. The way it works now is they come before us, they do a parking study, they justify the fact that we only need, 20 parking spots for this, okay? So how do we simplify that?
Well, even
Okay.
if we wrote it into our zoning that it's 1 bedroom, 1 space.
Right.
2 bedrooms, 1.5 spaces, more than that, 2 spaces. I still wouldn't mind putting in a, keeping the special permit process for a large development. Maybe you don't really need quite that many spaces when there's lots of apartments because everything is shifting around and there's just a little extra wiggle room. But but we already have that. So-
There's always an option that people come before us for a special condition.
Yeah, but as the base zoning, I like the simplicity of just purely on basis of number of bedrooms. Personally.
Other opinions?
Yeah, I would agree. I tend to think that if it's, if you want to put in a bunch of 3-bedroom units instead of 2-bedroom units or 1-bedroom units, that's great. It's different housing stock, different families can live there, whatever, but you don't need to start throwing in more and more parking spaces for it. So I like the idea of keeping it simple, not worrying about that necessarily and just saying,
So 1, 1.5, for 2,
and then
3 or more, 2.
I
exactly.
guess
What do you mean by
there-
1.5?
So if you have a 4-unit development and it's 4 1-bedrooms, they would each require 1 spot, but if it's 4 2-bedrooms, each unit only requires 1.5 spots total, so that the whole building would only need 6.
So you'd have to sort of fight it out, who got there first?
Well, somebody they would either be assigned or not. I don't know how it would work, but, sorry.
So I just need your, so
Name
for
and
public
address.
comment, name
it's
and
just-
name.
I
No,
didn't
that's okay. Just,
So, thanks.
just your name and
No, you
address.
just have to give your name and address so that, for the
Sure.
record.
William Andrews,
Thank you.
83 Grant Street. Concord.
Yeah, so that's the idea, is that either the developer would assign each, 1 to each unit and then 2 overflow spots or whatever that wouldn't be necessarily assigned to a unit or could be rented from the HOA, however they decide to do it, but you wouldn't have to have the idea is you would have to have not as many spots because you wouldn't be using as many cars as the units get bigger.
So from my vantage point, that is an, disincentivizing, I hate that word, family housing, you know, possibly. Because, you are, you know, you can see a lot of, well, I don't know what studios would be because those weren't in your numbers.
I think I
So,
would still call it one bedroom
Okay.
because it's hard to go, I mean, I suppose we could,
so you're gonna end
Yeah.
up with a lot of studios and one bedroom apartments, nothing wrong with that, but you know, you will not, I don't know what goes through the developer's mind, but I
I
could.
mean, presumably the rent or the sale price would be higher on a larger unit. But I realize that it's tricky
But you
to,
have more
Yeah.
smaller units
yeah,
and fewer parking spaces. So each unit, you know, I don't know if it's a
So,
square
I'm-
foot or linear,
I'm
but
gonna suggest that, we, Mark and I take this idea and this conversation back to the consultant.
Right.
And have him
Okay.
do a little bit more research on this option.
Good idea.
okay,
Mhm.
and then the other comment I have on this, are the definitions and, afford the whole issue of subsidized, low and moderate income housing here, versus affordable housing. I wouldn't want to have two definitions.
Well, he's not gonna
In the
wordsmith the
zoning.
warrant articles. Okay.
Okay, well, I'm just
Yeah.
saying,
Oh, yeah, no,
I'd
no,
like
yeah,
to
right.
have, you know, someone look at that and then putting in, include at least one employed member. I mean, I just found that a little awkward. So
Yeah.
I don't know, if you sent us these, I assumed you wanted comments on them. So those are my comments.
No. thank
They
you.
Okay.
definitely need to be
Okay, fine,
vetted
I thought
From
the phrasing was
a
awkward,
zoning
but I got the
perspective.
sense of it.
right. And
Yeah.
then the whole question.
Sam's an amazing transportation engineer.
Yeah,
It's
and
not
then,
an
and then
English major, it's okay.
ADUs,
Mhm.
I don't think quite. I don't know where that fits in as well in terms of. Would you put in this section also something about ADUs or?
So no, the parking for ADUs is separate under 4222.
Okay,
Well, if it were me, I would put it under the same thing of if it's one bedroom, it's one space, and if it's.
It can't be.
It can't be because
Okay.
you can't require parking for an ADU within a half mile of the train station.
Oh, but that would be a overriding state exception, but if it was more than half a mile from the train station.
Well,
But the current zoning bylaw only requires one.
Oh, one space anyway, you're right, it does, no matter the size of it, but we limit the size.
Or,
Mhm.
you know, two, so I'm fine with the ADU.
Okay,
Right,
yeah, I
right,
am,
we don't have
to-
I am too.
but wouldn't
actually,
you
yeah.
wanna put that
Good
under
question.
table 4,
Yeah.
the parking table?
I don't think ADUs are currently in the parking table.
Well,
No,
but
they're
should
not.
they be?
But they can, yes, they can be, sure.
Okay, so that's
Yeah.
just a recommendation that it all be there and, okay. Okay,
As a minor
Sorry.
comment, I've always found, the way the little parking tables are written up in 3 point, it's right after here. There's these three little tables here. And Mark, in fact, suggested adding footnote to the consultant at 7.7.3.1. And some of the labeling in these is uninterpretable. It could mean multiple things, and I've never been able to figure out what it's supposed to mean. So I only think that it would be an opportunity while we're changing this section anyway, to
Clean that up.
clean that up and make it possible to tell what it says. I bet these tables were copied from somewhere where it was explained, only we didn't copy in the explanations. Yeah,
Unless-
okay.
parking control model.
My only concern with something like
No, no,
that.
Get off
Well,
track. I wa- I
Yeah, yeah,
thought
no,
we
Would it make it more confusing to present as a warrant
Well,
article?
are we?
If you start
Or
futzing with the
No, so we're gonna go back to the consultant. Okay, what I wanted was your opinion on
the
this.
approach.
Okay,
Yeah.
best way to do it, we talked about some alternatives, we're gonna throw it back at the consultant and ask him to refine some things on it. okay?
On that one, but
Yes,
are you,
okay.
do you wanna go through the other ones or not?
Well, the easy one is repair. There is
Yeah,
no-
that one.
Yeah, well, that's so obvious, we
Take-
should just
take the
do that,
easy
yeah.
one,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Okay, we're good
Do
on
we
that.
really wanna do something about double lines? I don't think we wanna tackle that, okay, but that, again, I don't see the value in trying to do that.
As soon as I read his description of micro adjusting to get inside
Right.
the double lines, I was like, oh, I always do that, but I never
Right.
really thought that it wasn't really what you're supposed to do.
Well, but if we always do it for single lines, would it really be that much worse with double lines? Well, maybe,
No, it would be,
it would be,
because it's making it narrower, because the idea is that it creates
yeah.
whatever, and I was like, oh, God.
I
Yeah.
thought the pros there were quite valuable, but I thought the cons there were equal in number to the pros, so, it
Yeah.
made me. uncertain
There were
about the whole thing.
assertions there as opposed to data. I really need to know some factual information versus,
That's exactly what we asked him for.
okay, fine.
We did.
I could see getting bogged down in town meeting over that too.
Well, this is not, if it's a matter of not having enough time to expend, I think that that would be, something to throw under the bus, speaking of transportation, about the double lines, it's
Right.
not that important.
And then, you know, the other one was constricting the width to 8 feet from 9 feet. I need to see some data on that. I don't
Yeah,
know that.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I can't speak to that.
The one about length at end caps, there is some truth to that, as long as we don't have super long vehicles then hanging over onto the
But-
sidewalk.
Is this
the
really gonna
crosswalk.
drive us to what we're trying to accomplish?
No.
Okay,
Well,
I don't think so.
again, it's
Well-
not,
well,
it's
it-
much less important
It
than the
sounds
other
like the
thing.
parallel space dimension thing just reminded me of the discussion at the Dunkin' where they're gonna have the employees park in a tandem spot. And I was
Right.
saying like, oh, but if you're actually putting a tandem spot in, you're already having the discussion of why you can't do more, you're already getting relief some other way.
right.
So it seemed like that's an appropriate time for the actual applicant to tell us, look, you don't actually need 9 feet because, we can fit this
Right.
here
Yeah.
in an appropriate way and make the traffic lane bigger, as opposed to us saying that's fine in all circumstances.
Mm.
So my opinion is we don't wanna tackle that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, we wanna tackle the resident stuff. We need some more data. If he's got some more data on some of this stuff, then that's what he should present to us. Okay, so,
And that's the same with the small car,
right.
because I didn't get that at all.
Well, and
I-
now
I-
it's interesting
I mean,
because
why
it
would you
was,
wanna-
allowing it for a smaller parking lot, but a larger percentage. No, the
No.
other way, it was taking from one hand and
No.
giving with the other, so that
So
was
the
kind of
the
complicated.
proposal, currently it's in parking lots with 30 or more spaces, up to a maximum of 30% can be small car spaces.
And he was saying 2015, which means smaller parking lots could have small
And-
car spaces,
and-
but not as
And
many.
a fewer percentage.
Yeah,
So this may not be a topic the planning board, Mark and I've had a couple of conversations about this. From a planner perspective, 30 years ago, maybe small car spaces were gonna take off. It's not a reality. It's, people don't abide by them.
That's true.
They,
you don't see that, and it's not a requirement to mark them, it's just,
it is a
Yeah.
requirement.
Oh, it's a
to mark them,
requirement?
Right.
yes.
no,
It's like
I
a
mean,
compact only spot.
no, it doesn't say you have to build compact on
No,
all spots.
But what it allows you to do is to
No.
put more parking
More
into
parking.
a
I
smaller area.
know, but I don't see too many places putting them in just because they know that their
So
clientele.
Cross Point just put in 30% small
Oh,
car
okay,
spaces so
okay,
that
'cause
they
it
could
lets
get more
them-
parking.
Well, yeah,
Because that led them to not have to grant, request relief from parking.
Mm,
They could have the same size building.
mm,
They met the parking requirements for, all 4 uses. So they didn't need relief, but they only did that through having small car spaces.
mm.
I don't see.
I don't think it's worth us looking to change that at this point in time. I think
I
we
would
have,
agree,
we have
yeah,
other more important issues
I
to
agree.
cover in regard to this. Okay,
Okay.
and one of the things on the select board's agenda is parking as it relates to businesses. They made quite clear, okay? And I'd like Mike to address what their idea is? I don't know, Elizabeth, you didn't send out the memo that we got to everybody, did they? Oh, yeah, okay, great.
But it
okay.
came out, not
Yeah.
maybe no people haven't seen it, but we did
Yeah.
post it.
Right, okay. Is it okay if we have them talk about that now?
The last one you didn't talk about was, industrial.
Oh, yes. That I had a lot of trouble with.
What are your comments?
Oh, yeah, I didn't
Uh,
get enough time to read it, but I was having a little trouble following at a quick read what the difference was between the three different types of industrials being defined sideways for R and B and
Wasn't that part of the
manufacturing.
problem?
What are we,
Well,
but what are we
so-
gonna accomplish with that zoning change? Tell me how's that gonna impact the town? How do we stand up in front of the town and say
Well,
that this is
That
what
was
we
where I
should do?
fell apart. I didn't
The
understand that.
part I liked about it very much is if you could take the definitions and include under manufacturing. Okay, a facility where primary activity is the conversion of raw material or parts into finished products with a nominal percentage of space related to associated facilities such as office, warehouse, research, or supportive of, or retail sales of products
Yes, it does.
manufactured at the site, to ancillary to or supportive of the primary activity.
So that's,
Wait, but
that's your
isn't
brew
we-
pub.
Retail, ancillary retail, isn't that just accessory retail, which we already define?
No.
No,
No.
that's the whole.
No, that was the
There's
whole.
no
thing. So
accessory.
that, and then having that,
Having a
under
simplified definition.
manufacturing and then general industrial and research and development, and getting rid of warehouse and storage yards and open air sales. I actually thought that was kind of neat.
And what would it accomplish?
It would get people not worried about having Amazon warehouses on any of the excess property that's being considered in town. And it would give the opportunity to have small sales of retail products in maker spaces.
And make the parking definitions all very clear of what. You know, if you have a 2,000 square foot manufacturing and retail facility, it has exactly this much parking, you don't need to worry about it.
But wouldn't it be odd to handle accessory retail to industrial in the definition, whereas we handle an accessory uses
Well, I
elsewhere?
had it in manufacturing. I didn't have it under general industrial.
So if you want to send me your comments, I'll get. Mark and I can go over them with the consultant and, see if we can develop something a little different. Perfect. You see if Rob has any.
And now, Rob, do you have any comments?
I think, you know, it's hard with getting all the logistics hammered out for this because we're still, you know, a commuter community, you know, so it's gonna be challenging still.
And even if people work from home, you still need to use a car to run errands. It's
Yep.
extraordinarily limiting if you can't drive at all.
And I believe there are two public comments. I'll go in the order that I see them. The first is Nick Pappas.
Yeah, hi, Nick Pappas, 1743 Monument Street, member of the Transportation Advisory Committee, but speaking for myself. Yeah, I would advise you to go slowly. Some of the assumptions that I infer made by the consultant were things like the existence of ride hailing, which referred to as rail hailing, in the comments. Which don't exist really in Concord. And, you know, we don't have a public transportation system. And so I think the simple approach you're talking about makes more sense. The second thing, if you were to consider the compact car spaces. The proposed bylaw amendment changes the size of the regular car space, but it doesn't change the size of the small one, so they both wind up being the same size. So you'd have to change something.
Good point.
Let me see, the third thing, I was just looking through your, the existing bylaw and the table on required spaces, and the one for, just as an interesting point, the one for medical center and laboratory talks about 3 spaces per staff, doctor, dentist, or other professional, e.g. nurse, practitioner, dental hygienist, etc., plus 1 space per other employee in the largest shift. These days, businesses like that often don't have employees. They often use outside, temporary people to come in and do some of those functions. They often don't have offices. They just use exam rooms to see people or whatever. At any point, I just thought the way that was set up is sort of strange, given the way the business is actually run. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I also think that one is odd. If the one I'm thinking of, it says 3 per doctor, 1 per other employee, and there's also 1 or 2 spaces per patient. But I don't understand if you're counting all employees and patients, why the
No,
doctor.
it doesn't have any reference to patients.
Oh, then I must be thinking of a different one then, never mind.
You have,
Yeah,
It assumes that 3
One
people are
person
visiting the doctor at
waiting.
any one time.
right,
yeah.
yeah,
I'm not so sure we need to
People for the
address that
yeah.
Zoning bylaw. I don't, wouldn't want to go
Yeah.
down that path right now. Okay,
I
small
guess
step.
that one hinges on what does employee mean.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
what his point was.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
Thank you.
And the next comment, Carol Savoy.
Hi, Carol Savoy, 61 Belknap Street. I'm commenting on the multifamily residential that you had been discussing. I really think that you should keep 1 bedroom, one space for 1 bedroom and 2 spaces for 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms plus, at least 2 spaces. And most people want, 2 bedrooms, and, 1.5 isn't going to do it. People have guests, people have cleaning people have families coming by, people have teenagers, people need more than 1 car to get around Concord, even if you work from home, to go anywhere, to take your kids to go visit their friends, to take your kids to sports, to go to Costco, to go to TJ Maxx, even to go to West Concord from Concord. You're not going to take the train. So you really need 2 cars, and by reducing the parking spots, which when you brought the combined business forward 2 years ago, the reason it was shot down was, one of the reasons was the reduction in parking spots, because it allows developers to build more densely, and people thought it was just too much, too dense, not enough parking in the Thoreau Business District and Crosby area. And an example, when you gave relief to Concord Academy of the 75 parking spots last year, that's really had an impact on our neighborhoods. People park, I just took a walk around at 2 o'clock this afternoon and looked at parking, and pretty much every spot was taken on Main Street. They're parked all down Academy Lane. They're spilling over onto Belknap. They're spilling over to Middle Street. And all those people have Concord Academy stickers on them, right? So what are you going to do if you build more densely in this neighborhood and there's not enough parking? They're going to end up in the neighborhoods just like Concord Academy is, and they can't park overnight. So what are they going to do? Where are all these people going to park, right? There's no overnight parking anywhere. So I would suggest you keep the 2 parking spots for at least the 2 bedrooms. And the 1 spot or more for a 1 bedroom, because this is Concord. We're not Somerville, we're not Cambridge. People need to drive around. We're a suburban community.
Great, thank you. I don't need a public comment.
Nick and Pamela have their.
Okay, so Pamela Drip. You have your hand up.
Hi, Pamela, 13 Concord Green. I think that we have a lot of good ideas, and when we make I would urge you to consider things outside the box to make solutions such that if we have, for instance, a really good design that's way much taller than we're currently allowed to build, there should be a, like a route that we could say yes to that, like we do the planned residential developments for mixed use spaces. Also, I was worried about what I read in the Concord Bridge about MCI planning to essentially partnership with developers, and they would be restricted to what we do in terms of what is zoning permitted there, which is, we need to really make sure that we have the flexibility to what we require there to allow things like network geothermal and underground parking garages. Part of our parking things with municipal parking is that in small spaces, maybe we could do multi-levels. The over in 300 Baker Ave, the developer there is planning to put a multi-layer level parking structure there to make up for a lot of the parking that's going to be disappeared because of the apartment buildings that are getting put in, which also will have underground parking. Is there a way that we could do the zoning such that exceptions can be, there is a route for trying to get exceptions allowed with special permissions?
So there is already a section in the zoning bylaw that allows somebody to, by a special permit, request relief from parking, not just the number, but also the dimensional standards. So that is already established in the zoning bylaw.
And would they be able to do that with building of the units themselves too? Like height requirements seem to me to be extremely arbitrary. Do we have, a lot of communities have design review boards for projects that can make suggestions.
Yeah, but that is sort of unrelated to the parking issue right now. The broader questions of what controls or ways to avoid the controls are really sort of outside the purview of what we're talking about, related to parking and changes to the scope of requirements there. So, but thank you.
I think that if we, I understand that we're auto oriented and there's hardly any way of getting around it. But I think that requiring multi unit parking is not necessary, because those who do need more will not live in those places, and we need places for people who don't need more. There are young families with one car, and that you can get along fine. And we're not requiring people not to do more parking. I am against requiring 2 spaces for multiple bedrooms. I think 1 is plenty. And I think it should be possible to have say 3 parking spaces for 2 or 2 units.
Great. Thank you. Oh, we have a,
Can I ask a question, Jen?
Mhm.
I lost something in your conversation. You talked about residential, you talked about industrial, you started to talk about business, but where did you leave the business discussion?
didn't finish it.
Still waiting.
we never got that far.
All right, just checking.
Yeah.
You two
We'll
comments.
just go to one last comment on, and then we'll open it up to the business part. So, Nick, your hand is still up? Do you have more
Yes,
comments?
yeah, yes, I put it back up. Let's see, just on the topic that came up with the speaker before last about granting parking relief, and the example was Concord Academy. Granting parking relief is a huge benefit, and it only makes sense if the town is going to get something significant that improves Concord's overall transportation parking infrastructure, and not just a benefit to the developer or the landowner. So for instance, we need public transit. If the town were to grant relief from parking and we could get some investment in public transit from the developer, that's an interesting discussion. But to grant relief without some other offsetting benefit to the town is, in my opinion, ridiculous. Thank you.
Thanks.
So just as an update, this is something that the planning board is going to talk about. I'm gonna say like phase 2 of the parking discussion is amending the zoning bylaw to include with the relief from parking, more, robust transportation demand management, criterias. But that's 2026.
Yeah, that's excellent to hear. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And with that, we'll open it up to the business portion of the discussion. So we have some visitors who had some things to discuss. So I'll open the floor to them.
Thank you. I'm Mike Lawson, 1695 Lowell Road, and I'm the chair of the Economic Vitality Committee, and I'm here with,
I'm Mimi Graney, I'm the Economic Vitality Manager.
we're here to complicate your life. Our issue is with the business community. As Mark sort of indicated when he was talking about residentials, trying to simplify. And I think that the overarching approach that we think we're talking about here is that, and that is simply eliminate parking requirements for the existing business districts. Mark made a perfectly good example. If I'm coming into the business district as a new business, I'm supposed to have 10 and I can only get, where am I gonna get them? Well, you might be able to go to Holy Family and do that, but I bet you a nickel, people visiting the art association don't know that that's where you're supposed to park.
Right.
Right.
No, I know.
So it's getting these additional parking spots by contracting is totally artificial. And so I think it does two things. One, there really isn't anything a new business can do about parking in the existing district. And two, it simplifies the process for new businesses when they come to the town. And Mimi has been very active in this, and she's also talked about it, and I fully agree that we really should be talking about what do we want the business district to look like? And then what are the collateral activities that would support and do that? And I think or you said whether we need more parking or not, I don't really know. It doesn't appear that we do. Every time when I was on the select board to deal with this topic, it was like beating yourself with a baseball bat. If you survey the business community, whatever the issue was, 50% would say they wanted object A, and 50% would say they'd rather have B. And it was always like that. So this for us is there's nothing new businesses can really do about it. It'll simplify the process. And I think it would be a good thing for the town. So we're hoping you can incorporate this in your parking activities. Appreciate Mark coming to talk to the Economic Vitality Committee. Do you want to add?
Yeah, so one thing is to explain that this is a pretty narrow recommended change. It would be the existing structures in the business districts. If there's not a change of square footage, so it's not new construction,
it's related to changes of use. So one of the challenges that businesses encounter is that they're changing from, say, an office to a retail, or a restaurant to an office, or any kind of changes there. They might have had kind of grandfathered spaces before, that the historic downtowns that we really like are buildings that take up almost the entire lot. If they're lucky, they have 1 or 2 parking spaces. They can't manufacture them proximate that would be deeded to them. And it allows some flexibility and predictability for those changes of use. We're seeing in West Concord some vacancies, so we're wanting to encourage some creativity among the property owners to think about other uses that might be able to be there that would be beneficial. It creates an incentive, thinking about the things that we're wanting, is we're wanting the districts to be more walkable. So we don't want each property to be in a sea of parking. So we're wanting them to be kind of a shared approach to thinking about their parking, to not put the burden on individual properties, to think about it district-wide. We really like the, to kind of support the historic properties, to make those higher value properties, so that it doesn't disincentivize. You know, it's hard to get a tenant, they're more expensive properties to maintain, so we want to lower the burdens on those. And we really want to show that we want that kind of vibrancy, and we want to maximize the opportunities to use those properties, which might be a slightly higher use, which might in some cases trigger higher parking requirements. But I did like back of the envelope and sort of looked at, you know, changing from office to residential is showing, according to the parking requirements, the same amount. So a lot of these are the same numbers, but what happens is once you change the use, you're no longer grandfathered in, and it kind of opens up this regulatory hurdle that we then kind of go through the song and dance, and people need to get a relief from it, which is, you know, the previous use that had the same requirements, however it was relieved before. So we're trying to just create some predictability, and to acknowledge that we're really wanting to enhance and focus our activities in the existing business districts.
I have one question, and that is about employees. It would seem to me if you did away with having to have parking, that, and I worked at a shop or a restaurant, that would be great, because I would just park in front of my place of employment, and just, my car would be parked there for 8 hours, whatever, which I would think might defeat the turn that a shop might enjoy, and also might you know, serve as a non-revenue generating.
But can't they do that now?
Gee, that wasn't a problem when we had parking meters.
There's no parking.
We still have parking meters, okay.
But yeah, I guess you can do it now, and maybe it's done or maybe it isn't done, but it would seem to me that it would be in sort of everybody's interest, except maybe the employee, if they had to, you know, perhaps have they wouldn't be as inconvenienced, I guess they would be. Maybe it'd be easier to hire people if they could just park right out in front of this store. Yeah, but it seems to me reasonable that if we want a lively streetscape and people to be able to find parking, that perhaps it's not unfair to ask that at least the number of employees one has at a peak time during the day should be accommodated.
I think there's 2 things related to that. What you're referring to is more parking management rather than parking requirements based on zoning. So if somebody's parking on the curb right in front of your business, that's parking that the town controls by how they're going to enforce it, whether there's going to be parking meters or ticketing people that stay longer than the 3 hours that are permitted. So that's sort of a separate issue. And I know that was a concern in Concord Center, so I did a little survey, and I went out every couple hours and took down all the license plates and found out there was really only 2 people that were doing that, both working at one store, and the police department went over and said, like, knock it off. So it really wasn't the widespread, you know, some people sometimes have a perception of it, but it hasn't been a widespread thing. And I think that that's not something that's not really quite related to the zoning
Okay.
requirements.
Yeah.
Don't you think, though, there's a certain sense of fear on our part about loss of control of that, though? You know, I mean, the way it is now, if there's a change of use, then, you know, we at least have an opportunity to look to make sure that somebody isn't gonna do something that's gonna change the complexion of it completely, okay? So, you know, if we give that up, we've lost some control over what transpires there.
Well, we'd still need to be off the table of uses. They can't go and
They can't
come up with something.
come up with something weird that's not permitted. I mean, I think parking is your weakest weapon in some sense if you're trying to block some business from
Right, yeah.
coming into town. But I take your point.
I've been thinking about what Nick Pappas said, and in fact, I was thinking about that when I first read this, which is, it is, as Nick said, a significant benefit to a business, a developer, what have you, to allow them to put in a use with less parking, with relief from parking. And I completely agree with your point that these are old buildings and that we don't want people to tear down and turn into parking lots just to fit in a business. But we also have the problem that we don't have public transportation, and how can we fund that purely out of our own revenues? What if instead of just saying, yeah, okay, you don't have to have any parking, there's no, we'll waive the parking requirement, it's fine. What if we said, you can either follow the parking requirement because it's a change of use, or you can pay into, I mean, it ought to be a parking and transportation fund, but currently it's only a public parking fund. And as for how much one would pay into the parking fund, that would be a complicated discussion, not, you know, the $5,000 it costs you for a street parking space or the $20,000 it costs you for a garage space, but some amount of
I think that
money.
would be a matter for the select board, number one. And number two, if the select board was concerned about that avenue of revenue, then perhaps they should rethink whether parking should be free.
Well, one, no, it shouldn't, but two, I was also thinking about, you know, this is only for the change of use, and that's just a very small thing, and what about when it's a whole new building or something? But if we said, well, let's not worry about it now, because this is such a small thing, we'll worry about it later, then when it came to later people would say, oh, but you know, we're not requiring this for change of use, so we better not do that. I would kind of rather work into it immediately, even if it's a relatively small amount of money to offset the harm to the town, or the loss to the town of not requiring the private parking. That would allow the town to do something with either public parking or, better yet, public transportation at some point somehow.
I think one thing is, you know, the studies that the planning board's commissioned is showing that 1/3 to 2/3 of the parking is sitting vacant most of the time. So in some ways, Concord maybe doesn't want to build more parking because there actually isn't there isn't an issue that needs to be met.
Well, that's true, but the parking fund doesn't only have to be used to build the parking, it can also be used to maintain and improve the parking, in a variety of ways, and well, it's a bigger question of whether we should convert it into a parking and transit fund, but I would hope that we could somehow do that, because, I mean, the big problem is, where's the tipping point where you have enough density to allow transit? And you keep getting more and more miserable as things get more dense and you have no transit till suddenly it's dense enough to allow transit and things wonderfully get better,
We're
but.
likely not to create any additional density in these established business districts. It's not likely that you're gonna take, that's.
Well, in a sense, it's creating density because, if we require the parking, then either they tear down the building and build a half building.
Contract with Holy Family Church,
Or-
or contract with Crosby's.
Or the building remains vacant because nobody can afford to put anything in, which is a way of reducing density. And I don't want us to reduce density. Instead, I want us to increase density but make it possible for us to have either better parking or preferably at some point transit. And it just seems to me a little dangerous to, just plain give relief without trying to offset that with some kind of public benefit. But in the meantime, I don't want to require these businesses to actually have to put the parking in. That's all I'm
I
trying
think,
to
I think
say.
your point about payment in lieu of parking is great when it's a redevelopment. When you've got some options to be able to, and you're doing a level of investment where that's feasible. What we're talking about is, you know, the Phillips Paint that's been sitting empty for, is it 2 years now? And they're sort of looking at their options to be able to redevelop it. The office uses aren't gonna get a high enough rate of return. You've got no parking at all. It's gonna be really hard to find a viable buyer for that space.
If they
And-
had to put in the parking, but I'm agreeing with you that I don't think they should have to put in the parking. The only level at which I'm disagreeing is, do we simply waive the requirement? Or do we replace it with some, small, parking fee,
Right
offset
now,
fee?
you'd be waiving the requirement if they kept it exactly the same way, if they kept it office and retail. There would be no requirement by keeping the
Right.
use. If they were to just make it apartments and retail, suddenly it's my understanding that suddenly the requirement will kick in. And it doesn't quite acknowledge on how the changing of how people are working, how retail's changing, where we're gonna be needing to do some different uses. And so that's where those, and when on my little metrics of like, right now, what is being proposed for the number of parking spaces for residential and then for office, so those upper stories. Right now, they'd have the same requirements of parking. Would be, you'd give a waiver or grandfather in 4 parking spaces, or suddenly you'd say, oh, you have to come up with 4 parking spaces and pay us if it's under a different category. And that's where the differential, I feel like, is not seeming fair, and it's not helping to give the flexibility that the business community needs to, because suddenly it becomes this level of uncertainty of like, how much is it gonna cost us? How long is it gonna take? Will they even approve this change of use? And that becomes kind of the sticking point often, is the parking regulation.
Well, I would want us then to set the values so that people would know, rather than have it be some sort of,
But that's,
off
you know,
the
that's,
cuff.
as Mike said, that's gonna be up to the select board to do something.
Well, it would be up to the select board to pick that amount, absolutely, and to, in fact, to decide whether it's okay at all. What about if we said if it's the same number of parking spaces or less, then it's a plain waiver?
I didn't hear the last part of the statement.
What about if
Uses the
the number of parking spaces for the new suggested use is equal or lower, then, well, if it's lower, it doesn't matter. Oh, no, because many of these have no parking at all, then you are not required to put in any parking. But if it's a higher number of parking spaces, then you at least have to pay a fee.
So I can tell you, this is not a bylaw amendment that would be ready for 2025 town meeting. If this conversation with people who have an understanding of parking, takes 20 minutes. There's education that would have to go along with trying to amend the zoning. I think, to Sue's last point, that's probably, a little bit more on target of something that could happen quicker when the Philip Paint is a perfect example, where you have retail on the first floor, office on the second floor. What's currently there, may require, let's say 6 spaces. And somebody wants to do retail on the first floor and 2 residential units on the second floor, and that requires 6 spaces. Well, if that's the current, non-conforming status, then you can change the use so long as, the parking
Doesn't become more non-conforming.
doesn't become, more non-conforming, or I don't know the exact right language on how you would do that under zoning, because the words, a non-conforming use has meaning under the zoning act. So It may be a different type of language, but I do think there's an opportunity for that. The relief from parking, the planning board has already discussed moving forward and looking at the transportation demand management concept to be in parallel with relief from parking. And to Nick's point, I do think, even to Mark's point, not from a community basis. An example would be, when Cafe Nero went in, that was a substantial change in the number of parking spaces that they came forward with relief from parking. They did end up, renting spaces for the employees. I think it's behind Fritz and Gigi's. And that was part of their special permit. So, it did, offset some of, that impact. So I think it's a much larger conversation to try and move forward with a zoning bylaw amendment that just says within Concord Center Business District and West Concord Village and West Concord Business District, there's no parking requirements. That is gonna require, data and education for it to pass. But maybe there's those small tweaks that can happen much sooner.
Well, and we talked about the shared parking concept. I think what you just mentioned about Cafe Nero and stuff, I mean, that's something that should be looked at currently, okay? I mean.
Right, so that's other, and the other component that the board's gonna look at is just that whole shared parking and joint parking. So right now, Cafe Nero, Graham Nut, each individual one, they have their own parking requirement. We saw it with Cross Point. There should have been a requirement, a much higher requirement, or not higher, but a stronger requirement that they assess the parking based on those joint uses and what the highest parking requirement is on, an hourly basis, and not just the bank required this, this restaurant required this one, because we are going to see, there's going to be a lot of extra parking, on that property. So, and that may be a way, at least in Concord Center and West Concord Village, looking at the current situations and the places that don't, they don't have any parking. What are the options to facilitate, change in use, that promotes, that economic vitality. But it's gonna have to come with a lot of education for it to pass town meeting. So I think we can probably, brainstorm about a bylaw amendment, that, the Phillips Paint example is a really good example, and I think that's probably, something that people can understand. But to Mark's point, any change where the use increases the required parking, people just think of that, well, the minimum says this. Well, there's a lot of data out there that says, make it be a maximum, because once you get to this point, that's not what the industry is doing. So, so I think that's a question we can ask, ask the consultant about what is the industry standard that's happening around requiring maximums instead of minimums.
And would the consultant have something to say about how to phrase something about, you don't need to do anything with parking on a change of use as long as the requirement? No, that would be separate?
I think that's a word change. That's not a, that's not a calculation change.
Okay.
That's a word change. So I think we can probably, come up with something
I want
similar
to
to
say
like
that
that.
I know these issues are complicated, but I also know how fragile a vital business district is, especially in a place like this, which is small. And by being small, it's very difficult to affect the kind of economies of scale and connectivity that other larger communities can easily do when they have thousands, hundreds of thousands of people and the like. So I think we really need, if we appreciate the kind of wonderful little business districts that we have here and over in West Concord. We really need to aggressively look at the things that are impediments to keeping them the way they are. These aren't things that are gonna change the character of the business district. That's.
Well, I want to emphasize that I am agreeing with you that we shouldn't make people build the parking.
Didn't say you were.
It's,
I'm
yeah,
just suggesting that I
Yeah.
think there's an urgency with
Mhm.
this and other changes that we need to do to be able to keep the business district vital and attractive the way it is now.
Well, then I'm still gonna advocate, make the change that West Concord Village did for Concord Business and have no professional offices on the first floor.
Well, I think this parking requirement, I recognize is gonna be an education, but we've got 8 months before.
No, we don't. The warrant closes February 19th.
I know, but the time that the town meeting is going to be voting, we have 8 months. So I'm hoping that as part of the process is this gets drafted and vetted and brought to different committees, that there'd be an opportunity to, we've got a lot of steps before it even would get on the warrant. So I'm hoping we could at least massage this a little bit more, rather than sort of putting it off for another year, to be able to do something that's, in terms of like the streetscape, it's not going to change one iota.
well, then how about the idea of as long as it's not, doesn't increase the nonconformity, because that I think would be an easy argument to make to people. And that it wouldn't allow you to change the use to absolutely anything at all, but there are, as you pointed out, an awful lot of use changes you could make that would be covered. It would greatly expand the scope for businesses to change use while not making it be anything.
I have a question. What is the level of friction in, say, Concord or West Concord of businesses moving in when a building has been used for something else in the past versus them moving into a strip mall? Like, that's kind of what I think we're competing with, is like, someone's opening a new business. Do they wanna locate in a cute town center like Concord or West Concord, but then there's this like brand new strip mall that's been built and they feel like there's decent traffic there. Like, I feel kind of as if we're competing with super easy with the strip mall example and really hard for the Concord and West Concord example. And that makes me worried for our ability to keep good businesses in our town centers. I feel like they'll flee or like get interested, but then see how much friction there is and just go set up their business like within a month somewhere else.
You're exactly right, and but the other side of the coin is we can't just throw up our hands and say, do whatever you want to do, you know, because we like the way our business districts look and the character of them, the kind of shops. So the balance is trying to keep that look and feel, but also trying to reduce the kind of things that are gonna inhibit us from keeping that look and feel. And that's the tension that we face with all of these kinds of issues. We don't want to throw them all, the regulations out, or the place will look like kind of who knows what. But I know Elizabeth mentioned Cafe Nero. I still recall going to the opening and standing out in front of Cafe Nero when they opened the store, where he told me this was the worst experience he ever had in his life. And it wasn't blaming anybody.
Yeah.
It was just a lot of stuff for a company like them, which are used to going into some brand new mall and, you know, they're dying to have them. And here we go, yeah, you know, but we don't want you to look too big or too yellow or too red or too green. So that's the tension, and they're here and they're doing fine, you know, but.
In terms of changes of use, right now, we're really limited in terms of store capacity. So it's pretty much impossible to open up a new food business unless it was an existing one.
Okay.
So that's often a thing that goes for, as retail is is slipping away, that's a business that people want to move to, and we don't have that opportunity, so we have to think of other uses that would be viable. And so it's getting tricky.
Yeah.
And Concord Center has getting very high rents, so in terms of competing, but we also have a lot of foot traffic. So, but not every business is gonna fit, and we're trying to disincentivize these office uses, like you were mentioning, so that we don't necessarily want those on the first floor. So we wanna have more active ones, and those office uses have very low parking demand, but that also like chips away at all the other businesses nearby.
Right.
If you see Concord Center, it's black after 5 o'clock.
So whatever you could do in this area that would move it along and be helpful to the business, we greatly appreciate. And if we can come back and talk to you again or if we can help work with Elizabeth to prepare something for you to look at. And what Amy said, I want to say too, if you guys can move this forward, we'll really take the lead in doing the kind of, with you, of course, but doing the kind of education with the business community, with the business partnership, the Chamber of Commerce, with the other groups in town because Elizabeth is right. I mean, so is Mimi. It is 8 months, but it is only 8 months.
Well, so here's the warrant article issue. It is not a simple warrant article change. Because our parking requirements are based on uses, they're not based on the districts. So, it's not a simple change. So, because if it's, and so I mean, I'm gonna have to think about that on how you could structure that in the bylaw. Cause it's currently not set up that way. So so now you're just talking about, for example, business uses, you have restaurant, you have the requirement for restaurant. So and this is where the conversation with town council on structure, is it just adding a sentence that except in the Concord Center Business District, there's no parking requirement for a restaurant? And do that for every single use that you think is going to be in?
No, it's not that, because it's only for a change of use. If you build a new restaurant from scratch on the numerous unoccupied properties.
Okay, so now it says, except if it's only a change of use,
The existing nonconformity, whatever that might mean, it becomes.
Well, yeah, right, so is it in the, is it a legal non-conforming use, or is it just any building in Concord Center? Well, Fritz and Gigi's has, quite a bit of parking in the back. So, I mean, it's not a simple bylaw amendment.
But let us look at it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, let us smoke it over.
If we can
Okay?
help, please yell.
Okay.
Or
We understand what you're saying, understand that it's not an easy thing. And, we're trying to work on the whole parking situation at the same time,
Greatly
okay?
appreciate
And it's got a bunch of different components to it. I still wish we could find a way to facilitate more shared or joint parking relationships, because I still think there's parking around. Look at all the parking that Jim put in for Concord Market, that just
sits empty.
it's vacant, okay? I mean,
The parking behind the Christian Science Church is
Right.
totally empty.
yeah.
Behind
Yeah.
Holy Family, as you
Yeah.
indicated, is totally
So-
empty.
uh,
That's perhaps something for the town to take up, and that is, could the town contract with some of these other organizations in town, like some of the churches and to contract that's public parking Monday through Friday, I don't know. Uniform signage. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Okay, all right, thanks.
So, I guess with that, we'll move on to our other agenda items, administrative business. So we'll open the floor up to public comment. So this is public comment is limited to 15 minutes, no more than 3 minutes allocated to any one speaker. Public comment is limited to the items that are not on the agenda. And that includes the West Concord Advisory discussion, zoning, MBTA.
I mean, it does not include.
Does
the
not
things
include
that
those
are on the
things, yes,
agenda.
those
Yeah.
things are on the agenda, yes. So I don't know if there's any public comment. Okay, Carol Savoy? You will.
Yeah, hi, Carol Savoy, 61 Belknap. I had my hand up during the parking discussion. I wanted to make another comment. May I make that comment in
Oh,
this?
yes, yeah, absolutely. Apologies for not.
Oh,
So, yeah.
sure, not a problem. I just wanted to talk a bit about parking again, and I know you guys think there's all this parking everywhere, but I'll give you a couple antidotes since I've lived here for 24 years in the center of town. I just talked to the woman at the boathouse that works there. She also lives in town. And she said to me, oh, the parking is so bad downtown. I want to go to lunch every day and I want to go to Sally Ann's and I drive down there. I can't find a parking spot to get my lunch. So I end up turning around and coming home, and it's probably, I could walk, but I don't have the time to walk down there, walk back and get a sandwich. So she's sitting there saying, like, I want to do business with people downtown, but I can't find any parking at lunchtime. And then she said, I also live in town and people are parking all over my driveway. They park in my driveway. They block my driveway. So, she's experiencing lack of parking and, would like to visit these businesses and do business with them. And then Concord Provisions around the corner from me says, Karma's parking is all over the street every night. And when people come home, they want to stop quickly into Concord Provisions and pick up something, for dinner or, whatever. And if I don't have that parking in front of my store that's open from my business, they're just going to drive on by and go somewhere that's more convenient for them. So I'm losing business because Karma's parking is taking my parking. So, there's businesses that want to do business and people that want to go to these merchants, but, they're losing it because there's nowhere for these people to park. And then all the people that work at the pizza place and work at the nail salon, they park all over the neighborhood because they don't have any parking, and we don't complain because we like pizza and we like to get our nails done. But if you put more people and build in Thoreau and Crosby's with more density and don't come up with 2 parking spots, I don't know where these people are going to park, because right now, it's tight. And you guys are saying, oh, we're so oversubscribed in parking. I don't see it. I really suggest you take a walk around the neighborhood at lunchtime and see what it's like. There is no parking, and take a look down Academy and Middle Street and Belknap Street and see where everybody's parking. Because if you want more business and more economic vitality, you got to make it easy for people to park and get in and out. And particularly like seniors or young families with children, getting them in and out of the car is a big deal, right? They're not going to go shopping. They're not going to go out to lunch if they can't park somewhere close by. So I really suggest you make sure that you keep the 2 spots for the residential parking, and maybe take a closer look at the existing parking that's there, because I don't see all these, available spots. I walked down there between 2 and 3 o'clock today on a Tuesday. It's a nothing day in the middle of the week. I went by the Kai's Road 2 parking lots. I went by the down Main Street, down Walden Street. There was maybe 3 spots in the whole place, and they were far away from downtown. So people take the path of least resistance. They want easy in, easy out, and they want parking. And even if you read the MCI survey, which has to do with MCI and not downtown Concord, it asks what do people want? And people like, we want parking. That was clearly on the survey, and one of the things they were upset, what are you concerned about? And they said lack of parking. So I would take a look at that survey to see, what people want in Concord, which is parking, and, don't take away the parking of the residential units in the proposed parking zoning if you're going to, move forward with that. I think you need to leave it at 2 spots for, a 2-bedroom and 1 spot for a 1-bedroom. Thank you.
Thank you. And Matt Johnson, your hand up?
Yes, so I'm just a member of the Concord Housing Foundation, but I'm speaking for myself. Just wanted to highlight that as it stands today, our zoning bylaw with for planned residential developments is offers density bonuses for including affordable housing units, and that's a good policy. But as the zoning bylaw is currently written, it is requiring that half of those units, at least that are created, be at the 80% level that can go on the subsidized housing inventory. And what we have found now with recent developments, the 40B developments going in, is that we have increased the number of those units that are available, and now we really want to focus on generating more workforce housing. There are only 36 units today across town that are restricted at the level of affordability that we would consider workforce housing. So what I'm proposing is a 6-word change to the bylaw to change section 10.2.3.6 for the density bonus, so that instead of referring to the paragraph for low-income housing, which is probably misnamed, but relates to that DHCD conforming housing, it would instead just focus on paragraphs A and B of 10.2.3.2, which give 2 different tiers of workforce housing requirements. So, for the near term, I don't foresee as much of a need to generate these SHI conforming units, and it would be potentially quite helpful to relax the affordable housing requirements for PRDs so that we could motivate developers to create them. And I think there's a good chance of this because the buy down is less for those units. So the payback for getting that density bonus to the developer is more than it would be for SHI conforming units. In their meeting earlier tonight, the Concord Municipal Housing Trust voted to ask the planning board to take a look at this issue. And I would like to make this a future topic of one of your agendas to go through this in more depth and see if we could possibly propose it for town meeting in 2025 as a town-sponsored article. And I have a draft warrant article available that I can share.
Yeah, I think if you share that with Elizabeth, she can distribute to the group, and it's something we can bring up for discussion at a later meeting. That's an interesting idea.
Thank you.
Definitely worth talking about. Thank you. Do we have any other online comments or comments in the room generally?
Another one. I was just thinking, I've been to some other towns recently that had, lots of on-street parking and lots of demand for it, and they are using technology in order to manage it in terms of those like the pay by phone type system, you have like kiosks. And so maybe this is like, the third rail here because you guys have talked about it.
I will just say it was tried and the cell signal is not strong enough in Concord Center to use that kind of system.
Oh,
So
talk about
it
dependency
failed.
of all
Yes.
kinds of different issues coming
Yes.
back. But at any rate, like, I just kind of think that that could be a very good solution if all of the
Yes.
systems were in
Yeah.
place.
Yeah, or even without the payment, what is it called? Spot Hero or something like
Right,
that to find the
yes.
parking space?
Yeah,
But only if there is a cell signal, and obviously not everyone is comfortable with modern technology, but even if half the people were and used it to find a space, it would still ease up parking for everyone as a
Right.
side effect. But
yeah, I think the whole thing, like the fear of not finding parking is really the uncertainty, like, oh, I parked at this place yesterday, but it might not be available, so I'm gonna have to park across the street, like 2 spots over. If like you can see visibly that there's gonna be a spot available for you at your workplace, like 5 spots down from where you parked yesterday, it takes that stress and that fear of losing parking away, I think.
Maybe this is something that we solve by technology, I don't know, but thank you. for doing
Some drones
Yes,
and like lots
exactly.
more cell signals and like a map of the parking.
So, I guess with that, we will, move on to the next agenda item, which is the MBTA Community Zoning Overlay, the scenario amendments discussion.
Sure. So the planning board had asked, where'd it go? For, two changes, to sub-district 4, which is Baker Ave, to look at adding MCI Concord. So they, did do that, and, adding just the 51 acres, would, the unit count would be compliant, the contiguous acreage would be compliant, the station area would not be compliant. But,
Because it's one giant parcel, yes.
well,
It's more than a half a mile.
it's more than, it's outside the half-mile radius, much of
Well,
it.
if it was two parcels and we could only add the nearer half,
Yes.
it might actually work better, but it isn't, so it doesn't matter.
But he did say, I mean, you can offset that by, removing like sub-district 2, which is, Concord Oil and
Right.
Concord Lumber, and several parcels out of sub-district 5, which is Elm Street,
Right.
And so reduce the total acreage that's outside the district will increase your total acreage that's within the
Percentage,
station, the
yes.
percentage within the station area. So, that's the other. The other, question was, taking sub-district 4, adding Concord Green, but not adding, I think it's 336, 358 Baker Ave. So that's the little commercial, 2 little commercial buildings before you go over, the railroad tracks to 300 Baker Ave. So just adding Concord Green, then it would be compliant in all 3 areas: unit count, contiguous acreage, and station area. So with that said, my additional update, for, MBTA communities is, I had a conversation with your consultant that's assisting with drafting the MBTA community site plan rules and regs. So we're getting close. I'm trying to set up a meeting with town staff to review the draft. Coming to the planning board at your next meeting with, the rough, working draft. And then trying to set up, a public hearing for those, possibly at your December 3rd meeting. To adopt those and have them be, adopted before, December 31st, so that, we can move forward with submitting our district compliance application, along with, those, the rules and regs. So that, they can see, the planning board and the town is still advancing, our commitment. The conversation, the board had previously about actually trying to amend the district, based on the pre-adoption comments. My conversation with the consultant on the rules and regs, I think Linda sent me an updated map. There's like 33 communities have been, found compliant. And Emily, the consultant, is looking at some of the comments, that other communities have received, and the actual, zoning that those 33 communities have adopted, because she's fairly certain that the latest, interpretation or, compliance requirement that the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, is stating is that for any multifamily use in an MBTA district, you cannot require them to get a special permit for floodplain your local floodplain bylaw or your aquifer protection bylaw, which the conversation with town council like 6 months ago was, don't see that connection because a single family dwelling is a protected use, it's a by right use. And if somebody chooses to build within a floodplain or in an aquifer protection district and doesn't meet, the requirements, they need a special permit. So I think there's still a lot in flux. We're all still kind of waiting for, to see what happens with the litigation with the Attorney General and the town of Milton. But as I think about the board moving forward with a warrant article to amend the district to address the single contiguous district acreage, I also am, I'm concerned with moving forward with, taking care of that one thing. And the legislative session starting January, I think they start January 4th. I'm not sure what they are, what our legislators are gonna do with what's happening with, Milton and some of these other communities. And I'm previously, when the board had talked, some of the members had expressed concern about moving forward with a warrant article without actually having our district compliance, comments and our formal comments. And I think even some of the select board had that same feeling. I had originally thought, well, the single contiguous district, we kind of know, but town meeting and, there's a lot happening and, there's a lot happening every time. And I would hate to go forward for town meeting, address one comment, and then have the rules change again, or have the legislature change, the legislation, and then having to go back and change something again. So, I'm still going back and forth about, just moving forward and applying for our district compliance application, get our formal comments. And so that's where I'm at.
So what's the downside, Elizabeth? Okay, so we sit here and wait. We don't do anything to see how it's all gonna shake out. What's the danger to us if we do that?
In my conversation with the director at HLC, I don't think there's a danger. There, 52 communities, submitted for district compliance, did not go through a pre-adoption. These are the cities and towns around, the cities, did not go through a pre-adoption comment period. They submitted and, got comments, back saying you have to address this and you address that. And, on the map, I think it's called interim status or in review status. And so the community is not found not in compliance.
Yeah, so we're not
The
excluding.
town, the town moved forward and did develop zoning and did adopt zoning and in an incredibly, good faith, opportunity and moving forward and is going to address it based on comments. So, they have not found a community who has gone forward with the effort and adopted things. And yes, we need to tweak and change them. They haven't found them not in compliance. There's only 2 communities that have, they're in red and, not in compliance.
Right.
And, and that's Milton and Hamilton, yeah.
Okay.
So, everybody else is, in review, or, interim status or compliant. So I just think, there's still a lot of things in flux and, so And I would like to get feedback, at least, you know, between now and the next meeting from town council on, you know, their thoughts about the floodplain and the aquifer protection district.
Thank you.
So. So I, you know,
So,
guidance
but-
from the board on, you know, how. Based on, you know, all the conversations you've had and, you know, the conversation the select board had. And
Personally, I'm reluctant to plan to go back to town meeting if it's not gonna be, we're not sure it's gonna be the last time. Because it's a lot of work, as Linda knows, to get this stuff in, you know, to have everybody educated and on board and understand all the nuances of why we're making changes. And so if we're making all of that effort based on not the official final word, it then becomes, you know, if it was just literally resubmitting, you know, as Elizabeth is doing, like resubmit this compliance model, well, that's one thing. Going to town meeting is like a whole different ball of wax. And people will understand the logic behind, hey, we were told in this formal finding, these 3 things need to be addressed, and here, this is how we did it. Not, they kind of said we have to do this, and we interpreted that to mean this, and that means we do this, and all of a sudden people are like, you know, you have, you know, part of what we were discussing is rezoning a large residential community. And it doesn't necessarily impact anything about that community, but every single person who lives there is gonna have questions. And, yeah,
And not only that, it's that if we go to town meeting and say, well, if we make this change, then we'll be in compliance. We can't even say that
Right.
because we don't know that we would be because. Yeah, that's very hard.
it's a hard sell.
Yeah. Yeah.
And especially if we start rezoning things like pulling zoning off of certain parcels because, you know, and it may be if they come down with an official finding that the actual regulations say your floodplain district stuff goes away. Maybe Concord Oil is a terrible spot to have rezoned because they're just sitting there saying, okay, we're just gonna throw a bunch of dirt back there and we'll see what happens, like. Or Concord Lumber, which is wet parcel, you know what I mean? And it becomes
yeah, I mean, all of the floodplain gets excluded, you know, already.
Right.
And I mean, there is a portion of, you know, Concord Lumber that is outside the floodplain and, you know, you can put parking in a floodplain, as
Right.
long as you don't change the 100-year floodplain level.
Right.
You know, that's where, you know, 310 Baker Ave, that's why there's signs, the parking around back. Like, this parking
Free
can
car wash.
flood. So, you know, they could, you know, do something. I don't know to what density they could do something, but, and some of the pre-application comments, you know, we have addressed in the compliance model, just the GIS, you know, back of house stuff. So, you know, those will be taken care of.
those are sort of technical, not substantive.
No,
They
not
are, this is
substantive.
so, it's the part where even if we made the change, we still wouldn't know if we had fixed it, that really disturbs me. Because they could come back with additional comments in the formal review requiring further changes.
I don't know.
But you're not contemplating, when you say make a change, of undoing what has already been zoned.
No, just sitting
So-
tight with.
No,
what we
we're
have
just,
now.
everything is zoned.
All of the 5 districts will continue to exist with, but in multifamily housing by right.
For now, yes.
Not for now. That's the question I'm asking.
Oh, I mean, and until we make a change, if we just determine to in the future as part of whatever this is.
Well,
And that's
But
a,
but we're not
that
talking about
means-
rescinding our
Well,
zoning,
that's
just sitting tight.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm,
yeah, we're sitting tight, yeah.
not sitting tight, I mean, that zoning
That zoning is in effect.
is in effect.
Yes.
And but when we go back to town meeting with an alteration in our zoning, we are not planning on taking away the by right multifamily in those 5 districts, or are we?
I don't know.
We might, if we have to rezone things in
Okay,
order to
to-
comply.
Well, why, we wouldn't,
No, because of the minimum 50% station area, it can actually hurt you to have extra space outside, which is a flaw in the law, but that's not we didn't do it. So we could have to remove things further away in order to
To get the
increase the
50% of the state.
contiguity earlier. One would hope that the state would actually fix that
So
flaw in
that's
the law.
why
but
the
then-
example of adding MCI, just adding MCI Concord, that you get over the total number of units. You get over, the contiguous area, but now because you have added so much land that's outside of that half-mile radius, your 50% within the station area is down to like 48%. It's not 50% anymore. Because you've added, acreage outside of the district.
If you make your areas outside of the district too big, it punishes you. So
They
I
should
if you
have written
pull-
the
I
law.
understand that.
Concord.
but that's the reason I wouldn't move forward in terms of, because it's kind of, I would want to have a very high degree of conviction before I would
Right,
rescind
right.
Definitely.
And-
what we've already done.
Right.
And I don't, because I just don't think it would
And if
be-
somebody moves in the interim to actually do something, that's,
We
yeah,
zoned the
that's,
way we
it's
did
zoned
for
the way it
very good
is, and it's
reasons.
that project will be protected and we don't have to.
So
look at it.
I think what you're saying,
You're agreeing.
Linda, kind of supports the fact of, moving forward without the formal district compliance application, review from the state, adds to that because, I don't, maybe by then it's the question, it's like, yeah, 50% station area. We do have 50% within the station area. It's in 2 different districts and.
For all we
So-
know, they will come back and say, if you have more than one T station, then you can split it up.
I don't,
Yeah, we
Who knows?
can speculate on many things that
We
they
can,
could do.
but why,
But I think I would,
I think we all agree.
I think
Sit
that
tight.
I think if we move forward, and submit what town meeting approved, and then get a final, non-compliance, then we have to change it.
Yeah.
And then one of the changes is likely to be that we'll remove certain districts. Or
Or
add.
or add, I.
Well,
Or both.
yes, we'll have to do
There will be some modification.
modifications. And that at least gives those property owners some time to
Mhm.
hear that information, I hope. Okay. Yeah, okay, yeah.
So we have general mention. That's enough for you to,
That's enough for me.
perfect.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure you have what you need in order
That's
to
enough for
be
me.
comfortable.
Wanna
So then,
Quickly run through.
the
quickly run-
ATM.
Yeah.
So the next is the ATM zoning bylaw.
Um. okay, I'm gonna quickly run through this since it's 9:15. And. Okay. Seen this before, still waiting for FEMA to send their new, firm and, flood insurance study, but, all this will do is update the dates. And so I've updated the explanation, I am gonna be proposing a question to the moderator. This update in the FEMA maps, is only parcels around Virginia Road. It's actually the floodplain's getting smaller, and then a couple of weird spots, up, off like behind like Old Bedford, a couple weird spots getting smaller as well. So, my question to the moderator will be, I am getting from our GIS team a list of abutters for all of those properties where there is a change, so that they can get a postcard. That postcard will just alert them to this change, to this warrant article. It's getting smaller, it's not getting bigger, so.
Yeah, that's a good thing. So these are, sorry, you would just notify abutters of the parcels that are impacted?
I would
Or-
just send a notice to those property owners where the change is happening on their property.
On their property. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's, you said abutters. That's
Oh,
why I said-
no.
No, okay,
I'm getting a list of property owners.
perfect. That
Um,
makes sense.
So the question to the moderator, is whether it's helpful to be able to just blow in and on the warrant have a little graphic that shows, before, after, getting smaller, before, after, getting smaller. So that people are aware.
If not, an alternative would be to put into the explanation box, people wanting to see a map of what the heck can go to the town meeting website page.
Well, I'm actually, our GIS team does have these preliminary, layers. So once the actual determination
Oh, it'll be
is
in
provided,
Congress.
they can, upload them to the web GIS and,
As a new layer.
as, it would be, letter of map provision 2024 and,
Nice.
and people could see. So that would probably be what we'll put on the postcard to those
Right.
property owners.
Right.
So, it's getting smaller, that means certain, lots or certain owners will no longer be eligible to get flood insurance?
So currently, none of the changes. There are currently no structures that are within a floodplain that are going out of a floodplain. So it's just lots that have 100-year floodplain on them, and the extent of the floodplain is getting less. So I don't know how that works from
And
a flood, from the National Flood Insurance Program standpoint.
Okay. So you're notifying people that what is the consequence then of being notified? What? They-
Just to inform them of this change and
So it has not, usually when you're in the FEMA floodplain, then you can buy flood insurance from FEMA.
through the National Flood Insurance Program.
Right.
Yes.
But now, if your property is not, then you can't, can you?
You can still buy flood
You can
insurance.
still buy
flood
flood
insurance?
You pay a
from
higher rate, though.
FEMA,
You can buy flood insurance no matter where you are, it's just cheaper.
but not from that
So you can,
program.
No, I'm.
Okay, so anybody can buy
anybody, but.
from FEMA, I see.
But FEMA gets capped. If you really have a piece of
FEMA caps
property
at
in a
250.
floodplain, you need additional insurance beyond FEMA.
Right, and if you have a mortgage, your mortgage holder,
Right, it's
they
the mortgage
require you
benefit.
to have it,
Okay,
and they go through compliance exams associated with that. Anyway. It's just my understanding is we're required to have this be accurate, so we're making it accurate, and that's kind of just what it is.
We're required to have this be accurate, so that the town and its property owners can purchase flood insurance through the National Flood Insurance Program. You have to, the town has to formally adopt, the FEMA maps to stay eligible to remain in the, NFIP in the National Flood Insurance Program.
for everybody, not just for those homeowners.
No, for everybody, it's the community.
The community,
Yeah.
okay, okay.
If we were not to adopt these, then the community would.
Lose all its flood insurance through FEMA?
Which would,
Yeah, would not be
Problematic.
eligible. Property owners would not be eligible any longer to purchase. We would not be part of the National Flood Insurance Program.
Okay. Sorry
So
about
much
that.
for.
no, it's,
Sorry.
I apologize.
So,
It's worth understanding.
that, so that's why, you know, those questions, so as you know, with the explanation, it's, you know, so something to think about is that answer to that question, something that's worthwhile to put in the explanation.
Oh, definitely.
So, yeah, it's, and that, and you know, it's currently in there in the explanation that, you know, the town has to adopt this to stay, you know, eligible in the, you know, NFIP, to remain in compliance with the requirements. Okay.
Great. The next item is the board liaison town planner. update.
Oh, no, you
Actually,
have,
you
Oh, sorry. Oh, there's
have
more.
quite a
Sorry.
few.
Oh, sorry. You pulled it off the screen up there. That's why I thought we were done.
Well, we were done with floodplain.
I know. I realized they weren't all the same document after I
all
said
right,
it.
this one, I promise we'll go much faster. This was the one, real quick, correction to the sign bylaw. It should be addition instead of additional. And then, the other one is
Not
the
the board.
clean version of the ADU. ADU bylaw. So there were, you know, the board concluded, you know, 1,000 square feet. And excluding garages from the 1,000 square feet. And this section right here, these in this final draft format, I will send off to town council now for their final review. The board may not get it back for your next meeting, but I'm hopeful for, you know, at least your December meeting. Which gives you more than enough time to finalize the warrants and, you know, for February 19th. The parking that we already talked about. Adding tourist home, that was what the building commissioner talked about. And then, adding the part, right now, you can get a special permit if you are a legal non-conforming lot with less than the minimum lot area, but then also adding, you know, whether you have less than the required frontage. And that was it for that one. And then, the board had talked about amending the site plan rules and regs. First, we had talked about making it more consistent with like special permits. 65 days to open the public hearing and then 90 days to render a decision following the close of the public hearing. And then in conversations with town council and the MBTA communities, felt that this probably would not, first off, would probably not pass the Attorney General, because it makes it just like a special permit, and that's not, but town council did say it was, you know, it was worth it to try and just at least just up the number of days from 90 days to 120. 3 months, if you were to get, you know, a site plan application for a really large daycare, you would not be able to get through that process in 3 months if you had to go out and hire outside consultants. You know, that takes a month. So, but, you know, is this a critical bylaw amendment? It's not a critical bylaw amendment. You know, most of the time when we have really complicated applications, those applicants are aware that they're complicated applications and they grant a time extension. So, if the board, you know, wants to not move forward with this, and, you know, I don't have any concerns.
But I don't think we get a whole lot of pushback about it either. Town meeting.
Is it,
Yep.
would it be helpful for you guys to have this just in writing?
Um,
I mean, I guess that's the question, is
No.
is there value in even writing it down, or is it?
I mean, again, it's, it's not critical. I mean, the process for, getting a time extension and just filing with the town clerk, it's not onerous. It's not. So,
And when we've been involved in it, an applicant has never said no to it that I can remember.
not that I can remember in recent years.
Right.
There might have been an example when I was here the first time that I can remember that, an applicant was.
Just being difficult.
Right.
Standing on their rights.
Yeah, so, so it's not, as I said, it's not a critical bylaw amendment. If the board does not wish to move forward with it, I'm fine with that.
You're looking for a decision?
I, better than sending it to town council and paying for town council to review something
Yeah,
that
if
you're
you're,
not
if you're saying
gonna
there's not,
review.
if you're saying there's not much value on your end for it, we're better off focusing on the things that matter. I don't know.
But if you think that it could be helpful as a
Right.
backstop, I don't think it would be that heavy a lift to get it through, so,
Yeah.
I mean.
I mean, that's
That
the
still
balance,
puts it, you're the one really who knows the
Yeah,
most
it's,
about how
um,
much trouble would it be, not
So
that.
I guess why did this come up in the first place?
Well,
What-
in the first place, no, it came up, it'd be really nice to have, to be able to just open the public hearing and, not have to worry about.
Not
the
stressed
time
about
limit.
immediately getting the time limit problem.
But then,
But we can't do that.
that
Yeah.
raised,
Okay.
bigger red
Okay,
flags, so
so-
then, just scaled back, so,
Oh.
honestly, yes, you could get it through. But now you're talking about submitting something for the warrant, having a public hearing, doing a presentation for public hearing, having something teed up for town meeting, so, it's kind of a push.
So I get it. So originally, as envisioned, it would have been great.
It would have been great.
And then, but as implementable, it's a marginal improvement that is just not worth the time of, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I don't see the point in pushing it then. Yeah, does anyone else disagree? No.
And then the last ones, which I'm not prepared for, is reconciling the housekeeping one with town council's comments and coming up with a draft, so.
I wanted to ask you about that because I was actually confused with, whose court the ball was in. Am I supposed to be,
No.
okay,
Mine.
all right. Cause I failed to
All
do
mine.
anything about it and I wasn't sure if it was town council or what.
It's all me,
Okay, but
so,
yeah,
yeah,
all
no
right.
worries.
Sure.
And then there's the housekeeping one, but then there's the second one that the board talked about that Sue brought forward. Was, what did we call it, reconciling the findings language?
All of the, does not derogate from the intents and purposes
Oh,
of this
yeah.
bylaw one, yes. That one.
Again,
Town council had a good name for it, which I'd forgotten what it was.
so, again, not really something that's,
Oh,
floated
you
to
wanna
the top
just
of a
drop the
problem.
whole thing?
Um,
Or maybe I could take another look at it and see if there's just one or two of them that seem particularly nutty. But, if the board doesn't wanna move forward with it, I'm not going to, yell and scream. It just seems odd that there's that one particular phrase, which I've now blanked on, which seems to say to take away, all meaning from the language.
well, let me
Yeah.
look at it
If
one more
there's one
time
or
and I'll,
two, then
and
that
I'll-
may make sense, but I don't wanna come up with a solution in search of a problem. If that makes sense.
Yeah, wow.
so I'll take another.
It helps to
I'll
know
take a look.
that the zoning board of appeals doesn't even know what the more sensible version of the language means. So,
Yeah,
I mean, if they don't know what it means, even when it's well written, maybe it's not worth bothering.
there's currently 3 lawyers on that board and
Yeah,
it hasn't risen to the top of being
Right.
unmanageable, so,
okay,
but I'll take one more look at it.
yeah, thanks.
And I think that's it. All I have for that one.
And you'll get us copies of those three things that we talked about that we can look at after you get final drafts from
Council?
council. Is that
Oh,
what's
yeah.
gonna happen? Okay.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Cool. All right, the next agenda item is the board liaison town planner updates. I feel like you've given us enough updates tonight, unless you have anything else that's.
Let me think about it for a second. Somebody else
Any
has
liaison
updates?
updates?
Well, the CPC is having a meeting right now, which I'm not attending. They're reviewing the proposals. It's fine.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Want to do the minutes while you think?
Oh, sure.
Sure, that'd be great.
So we had two meeting minutes which were updated based on comments received from Linda and Sue. Those were the July 16th and the September 17th meetings. I reviewed them and didn't have any comments. Thank you too for doing a deep dive into that. I'm not, I mean, no, I do. Yeah. If we have a
I
motion.
make a motion that we approve the minutes as amended of the July 16th and September 17th meeting.
Second.
Is it as amended or did they get recirculated?
They get
So
recirculated.
it's-
Recirculate.
In that case, it's as submitted.
As submitted, yeah, yes,
As
circulated.
submitted. Yeah, thank you.
Great. So we are under hybrid, so we'll do a roll call vote, right? Because it's a vote, yeah. Sue?
Aye.
Linda?
Yes.
Mark? Aye. Rob?
Yes.
And I, Andrew, am also an aye. So with that, we have those.
So a couple of updates, Middlesex School is, breaking ground on their new field house. So that's moving along. Concord Academy will likely, be finishing up the Centennial Arts Center in March.
That's cool.
So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Let me see, what else do I know? It does look like the planning board, I'm not sure when, but you may be getting, a residential compound, a special permit application and subdivision. Which you won't be
Nope.
familiar with it because there's not that many.
Yeah.
But it is a special permit process that allows the waiver of various dimensional requirements in exchange for very large lots, like I believe it's like over 5 acres. So we'll see about that one, but I think it's either section 8 or 9 in the zoning bylaw, so you might want to just familiarize yourself with it.
I've read it, but the last time I wondered, why do we have this?
Yeah,
So now
I
I will
think-
find out, I guess.
Yes.
I think I was
yes.
flipping through and saw residential compound. That's interesting, and then moved on.
And then lastly, the comprehensive permit for 275 Forest Ridge Road. They will be making a initial presentation tomorrow night to the Board of Appeals on the revised materials and plans that they submitted. What was it? At 9:55 this morning. So nobody will have reviewed them. Very few people will have seen them, including board members. But so they will just be making an initial presentation. And then I'm confident that the board will just immediately continue the public hearing. The tentative date right now is December 5th. That meeting spaces at a premium. I think the meeting's gonna be at the meeting room at the light plant. That'll be first for us. But between tomorrow night and December 5th, the outside consultants will do their review and provide their comments. That's on that one.
You're keeping busy,
Thanks, sir.
as always.
Yeah, it's a whirlwind. Mhm.
That is the last agenda item, so with that, we will close the
Adjourn.
adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
And that's
Thank
it,
you.
thank you.